Hey everyone, normally this would be the weekend of our seed swap and we have the ceremonial cutting of the cushaw, but due to the COVID restrictions, we're not able to have our seed swap this year. Hopefully we'll be back next year, so we're going to go ahead and do the cutting of the cushaw here and thinking about all of our friends that should have been here this weekend. This is normally the opening of our seed swap, and everyone would have free seeds out of these seeds that we've got right here. This is the white cushaw, and again, we hope to have the seed swap again next year.
For old-fashioned recipes and your gardening needs, while sipping on Kentucky bourbon. You sit right back in your big red hat, we're taking rural back from the urban. Listen to the stories where Kentucky is proud, share the giggles with all of your friends. You're all tuned in to Friends Curating.
Good morning, welcome back to Friends Drift In, episode 11. And today we're going to talk about
seed saving today and our seed swap. Normally this would be the weekend of our seed swap, as you've already heard, and kind of a sad day for us a little bit because we're not able to have it, but we're going to have it again next year, have no doubt.
So, background on what is a seed swap. We collect heirloom vegetables, and some say that we are the owners of the heirloom vegetable seeds, but I always feel like that we are the curators, that we're just here to preserve them and pass them on to the next generation. And that's the way it's always been in Appalachia. You save seeds from one crop for the next year. The Appalachian Heirloom Seed Swap would be celebrating its 10th year had we not been shut down by the state, basically because of the restrictions that's going on right now. And that makes me very sad and melancholy when I should be happy because spring is almost here. It's almost here. The joy of bringing seed savers together is probably as much fun as preserving the seeds themselves and getting everybody together and hearing their stories and hearing their histories. Charlie, when we get together with all of our seed saving friends, how is it?
Oh, it's a party. Yes, to be honest, we call them our seedy friends, and everybody will come down the night before, usually on a Friday.
From as far away, we're in Kentucky, and from far away as 12 states. We get people from 12 states that come here.
We've had people from like 30 or 40 states altogether over time. We've had them as far south as Louisiana. You can't get much farther than that without going into the ocean. We have them as far north as New York, Michigan, and all that. And all those people don't actually have a tie here, which normally you would see.
So the idea of seed swap and seed saving. The seed swap is you have people that curate seeds. And so they bring the seeds that are heirloom, that are not an F1. F1 means that they're a hybrid. These are open pollinated, or what they call heirloom seeds. And we exchange them with each other. Now, there was a time in Appalachia when I first came down here when people were very guarded with their seeds. Every holler had their own seeds, and there wasn't a lot of sharing going on unless you were family.
Yeah, that's true. But in families, if you moved from Johns Creek to Elkhorn City, you took your seeds with you.
If you migrated from here to Texas, which many Kentuckians went to Texas during the Alamo, just like the people from Tennessee. A lot of our people went to Texas, and they took those seeds with them. Back about 11 years ago, we talked about in several videos, we've talked about the big flood, the Mother's Day flood.
Yes.
And we have up toward Elkhorn City, which is right on the Virginia border of Kentucky, there was a fellow that used to sell white cushaws at the farmer's market when the farmer's market was just a little tent city. And the name of those cushaws, it was a white cushaw, totally white cushaw. And a cushaw is a long, it grows about 120 days, 80 to 120 days, depending on which ones you get with it. So it's a winter squash. And he grew these white cushaws, and the history of it was that they called it the Farmer Brown white cushaw. And Farmer Brown was well known in the community, and he would give away these white cushaws at Christmas. That was part of his Christmas legacy to his community, to help feed them. And the cushaws are great eating, but they were also used as fodder for livestock, both chickens and cattle.
Chicken, cattle, yeah.
You know, but that flood nearly wiped out the Farmer Brown white cushaw. And that would have been a total tragedy for Pike County, because it's something that's been here forever and ever and ever. And when that happened, I mean, we were already seed savers, but when that happened, myself, Charlie, and our buddy Neil Hunt said, we've got to do something about this. We've got to get people to understand that sharing seeds is insurance. Because if your crop fails, or if you have a flood, but you have shared your seeds with somebody else, you haven't lost everything. So when we talk about saving seeds, there's lots of different seeds that you could save. And the key is, if you're really trying to get purity, is to have isolation distances. Now, what does that mean, Charlie?
Well, you know, that way they don't cross with another variety and change the trueness of the seed. And isolation is like, if you're going to do, let's say you're going to do beans, string beans. You got to plant them. You can plant them in one row, but that row's got to be 10 foot away from everything else.
Every other bean
plant. Now you could plant them right next to a squash or a cucumber, but the next row of beans has got to be 10 feet away in all four directions.
If it's not the same seed.
Right.
I mean, you could obviously do 4 or 5 rows.
Yes.
And the way we do it, you know, we know that for ours, a pound of seed is about what we want to get at least of each variety that we grow. So I plant one probably 25 or 30 foot row that is really set aside just for seeds for the next year. And what I do is I always save, I planted this year's seed, I still save a little back. And then when I gather the seed at the end of the season for what's grown this year, then I mix those two together. And hopefully that will help continue to keep the genetics from not what they call petering out, just kind of, it keeps the genetics strong. And the great thing about growing your own beans or growing from seeds that is heirloom and saved is not only the history, but as the beans acclimate to where you are, that genetic code alters, and so it gets used to your climate, and it really becomes a part of you and your land. I mean, you know, we talk about our cowhorn okra, you know, we've kept that forever and ever and ever, and it's changed a little bit, and we filter it back around. And we talk about the various beans. We are bean people. One of the ways that you can isolate, besides just isolating by distance, is that you can isolate by production date. So sometimes you can, so that your blooms aren't blooming at the same time. So if you get like a bean is about a 55-day maturity, and then you've got another bean that's a 65-day maturity, the likelihood of them crossing is a lot less. But for the sake of purity, you really try to keep them very well separated. Yeah. Beans are self-pollinated.
They are.
Bill Best, who is one of the most noteworthy seed savers, resides in Appalachia up in Berea. And Bill Best likes to tell the story of the bumblebees. You know, and it's said that if you're an engineer and you look at a bumblebee, and a bumblebee should be able to fly. You know they do. And technically, bean blossoms should not, are self-pollinating. But if you watch bumblebees, if they're so motivated, they will go in there and they will rip those blossoms open. So that's one of the ways that things get cross-pollinated, and you don't really want that to happen with your beans. That's why you isolate them. So
Bill Bill grows his in a high tunnel, one variety per high tunnel usually, so that it's definitely separated.
He does some of his main beans he does in high tunnels, and then he grows some for seed saving. He does these great towers, and they're it's like a giant pole, like a flag pole, and it's put on a hinge at the bottom so that you can lay it down. And then he, at the top of the post, he has the spokes of a bicycle, and he lets his pole beans grow up that way. And then at the end of the season, he just lays, it has that latch on it, and he lays it down, and then he picks his beans. He dries his beans in a high tunnel because you get that really high heat. So when we talk about saving seeds, there's different kinds. With beans, the way that we do it is we lay them down on sheets of newspaper and just let them air dry. You know, it's great if you can put them in a high tunnel or someplace where there's heat, because they'll dry faster and they won't mildew. That's one of the disadvantages is if you don't get them dry, you know, you got to have them just one layer thick.
Right.
And I let them dry for a while in the pod. A lot of times even till they get crinkly, if I've got the time. And then you split them out, you get them down, you kind of sift them through. You can use a sifter or a strainer to kind of get some of that chaff, whatever you might call it. And then you make sure that they're really dry, and then you sack them up. I sack them up in plastic, and I'll put on the date that they were harvested, you know, what year they came from, and what variety is in there, and where did they come from. And where they come from is just so cool. Bill Best has shared with me some Conover bean seeds, which were lima beans. And the story behind them is that a soldier that served in the Civil War was coming back to Kentucky walking. And as he was going through Alabama or someplace in the deep South, he walked through this field that had dried beans. And he picked up enough to put it in his kerchief and put it in his pocket and carried him home. And that family has grown those beans ever since the end of the Civil War. And you know, that's a cool thing to think that you are a curator of history. You're not the keeper. You're not the ultimate end all ends. You are just one link in the chain. And for me, that's the coolest thing about seed saving, is preserving our history and preserving especially Appalachian varieties. I'm very passionate about the Cushaw. The Cushaw is how we got back into gardening in the first place. I've talked many times about how my grandfather would raise Cushaws, and it was just, if you didn't have Cushaws in the garden, you didn't have a garden. That's just the way we felt about it.
And beans are huge in this area, green beans of all kinds, but you know, we grow a early white harvest given to us by the Howard family, some of our good friends. We have a white Hastings, we got that from Glenn Gibson. We had white cut shorts from Cousin Roy Mead. So that's the thing, is you remember where you got all these beans from.
So, beans. We love growing beans, and we probably grow, easily 10 200-foot rows a year, you know, and we stagger some of them so they don't all come in together, and we always plan to have some for seed saving. Now, other things that you can save seeds from: lettuce. You can let lettuce go to seed, and it will bolt and shoot up.
Lettuce a biannual, though?
It is.
Every other
year?
Every
other year you have to let it sit. Peppers.
Same thing with peppers. You take the peppers, you keep them isolated, and then when you get ready to use, you can actually still use pepper. You just take the seed cavity out and let those seeds, shake them off and let them dry.
Right. So, okra, we usually let them go all the way. We'll let them sit, you know, we don't harvest them till almost Thanksgiving. I mean, for the seeds. You
know, with okra, most time you get it when it's about the length of your little finger.
Little finger. They call them lady fingers.
Lady fingers. So what we do is we pick the one, and if they get bigger than that, we just leave them on the stalk. And then at the end of the year, we go out, and once they out, we just let them dry mostly on the stalk, and then just go cut them off and bring them in, kind of like you would do with corn.
Now, we can talk about here in Appalachia, where we particularly are on the Big Sandy. I was corrected. You said I wasn't really on the look. What did I say the other day?
We're on Johns Creek. Johns Creek feeds into the Leviza Fork of the Big Sandy. The Tug Fork is one over out of Williams.
The Tug Fork is where the Hatfield-McCoy,
Right.
a lot of the
feud was
Hatfield-McCoy feud was. We're a little ways away from that, not all that far.
15 miles.
No, but it is, well, we're on the creek where we are, and this whole area was settled by many different Indians, Native Americans, if you will. The Native Americans that we know were here, people will talk about the Cherokee, they will talk about this and that, but what seems to be with my family line, and seems to be what the relics that we have seen in this area indicate that we were settled, that the seed savers here were the Tutelo. And the Tutelo were also Sesquipani. They came from the Piedmont area of North Carolina, and they kind of circulated through here, and eventually a lot of them wound up in New York with the Six Nations as the different political climates changed. But they carried those seeds with them. My grandfather had seeds that he had in the family for many years. We had a goose bean. Everybody
has a goose bean.
Kentucky has a goose bean. Tell them what a goose bean is, Charlie.
Well, a goose bean is when the story is that Grandma killed the goose, and when she cleaned it, in the craw of the goose was this handful of beans. They're kind of a larger brown bean, but and that's what so they call those the goose goose craw.
Goose bean, or sometimes you have the turkey craws.
Turkey craw, same idea, yeah.
So when beans are something that we're particularly passionate about in Appalachia, and we'll probably talk more about beans than anything. Let's talk about what is a greasy bean, Charlie.
Greasy beans usually a little shorter. They got a little tighter pod in them, but the pod gets shiny.
It doesn't have those little hairs like a regular green bean does. It's real
slick,
oily
looking.
Now, it doesn't taste that way, and that's a fine bean. Greasy beans are a fine bean, and you can sell them at a premium here.
They cook a little when you cook them like the white half run or the half runners or that style of bean cooks with a green hull on them and a white seed. Well, the greasy beans you can get a white or a brown, but the hull gets a darker color and a little shinier when you cook it as well.
It's a little bit more meaty in the pot liquor too as you cook it down. A greasy bean is just much more meaty. Now, greasy beans are, like I said, they're a premium, and when we're growing greasy beans, we keep them double isolated because we want to make sure that we keep that seed pure. Some references that you can use for isolation distances. One of my favorite seed catalogs has to be Southern Exposure Seed. They're out of Virginia. They're run by a lady named Ira Wallace, and they are fanatical about saving seeds and preserving what is in what I would call the Appalachian region, more Appalachian than the South, more this central Appalachia, Virginia, West Virginia, some of their claims to fame. One of their best is the West Virginia mortgage lifter. You know the story of the mortgage lifter, Charlie?
I know that the mortgage lifter, the guy planted tomatoes and raised those for a cash crop in order to pay the mortgage on his property.
He was I believe he was a mechanic or something like that. That was a repair kind of guy. But these tomatoes were so fabulous and grow so big and lush and juicy that literally he sold the seeds and paid off his house. And how great a story is that? When we talk about storytellers, that's a big part of the history of Appalachian seed saving. We would highly recommend books by Bill Best. He is undoubtedly the Obi-Wan of the seed community. John Cokendoyle,
yes,
out of Tennessee. John is the master gardener for Blackberry Farm, which is a hoity-toity resort
till you meet John.
well, yeah, near Knoxville in East Tennessee. And John works with a Washburn. I can't think what his first name is right off, but they preserve the gardens there at Blackberry Farm, and he is a master seed saver and a storyteller and a character in his own right. We've been blessed to have John here several years. He has a documentary that was filmed by PBS, You can find that online. I'll try to drop a link below to that. But a documentary where he's known for wearing his flannel shirt and his bib overalls and singing and telling stories, and he keeps the journal and he draws little pictures in it. It's just the coolest thing. He is a real trip. And then there's some of the younger generations.
Ben Cohen.
Ben Cohen up
Or
in
Bevan
Michigan.
Cohen.
Well, we call him Ben, but Ben Cohen he's from Michigan. And Ben has been to this seed swap here in Appalachia or Pikeville for several years. Stayed at our house, stayed at the house, brought his wife Heather. He has several books out. Ben works closely with Baker Creek Seeds.
Yes.
And always goes to the big festival that Baker Creek hosts out in California. He has several books, and he's always preserving seeds. Some of the other people that we've met, Lisa Bludnick.
Lisa
Bludnick from New York comes down here every year. Lisa, we miss you.
Yeah. His farms with those big draft horses and everything.
We
Great.
love seeing her draft horses. We love seeing what kind of new seeds she's coming up with, new old seeds. Remy was a good friend of ours, and we lost Remy in the last 18 months. And Remy was good with beans, and she introduced me. She was also a good cook, and she introduced me to having white beans with greens. So I never can eat beans and greens without thinking of Remy. And we think about Karen Golden, and she's a spitfire.
Oh,
and
yeah.
she has
lots of tomatoes.
Lots of tomatoes. She's up in Michigan. Our friend Vicki Tuies, who is back in my hometown up around Union, Kentucky. Vicki hosts a seed swap as well. We've been blessed that our seed swap has kind of helped get other seed swaps going. We should probably talk about, what is a seed swap, Charlie?
A seed swap is everybody shows up. You can do two things. You can either buy and sell, or you can trade. If you bring in, put them in little bags of 8 or 10, 15 seeds apiece.
You're not getting poundage.
You're just getting a start, something to start your own seed collection with. But you come in there and say, well, I've got great grandma's turkey crawl bean that I've had in our family for 200 years. And then you go up Bill Best, and Bill will say, well, I've got Aunt Jones that I've had for 100 years. Well, we'll trade. I'll give you some of mine, you give me some of yours. That's where the word seed swap comes in.
Because it's a trading, it's ours is buy, sell, and trade.
Right.
So, some people come to sell, and some people come to buy, and a lot of people come to trade and just sit down and tell the tall tales. We don't want to leave out Gate City Jack.
Right. That's what we all know him as. So we've had people present from Louisiana, from Illinois, from Michigan, obviously, from New York, from Tennessee, Arkansas, West
Missouri.
Virginia, Missouri. Those are people that have come up and brought their seeds up here to trade and set up a table and in the show area, as you will. And we've had the Lincoln
The Lincoln people from Indiana, the Lincoln Cushaw is a white Cushaw, and we've been blessed to have him come several times. Robert, he comes in from the park there in the state park there in Indiana and brings down some Lincoln Cushaw seeds, which is a cool thing because, of course, Lincoln was here in Kentucky, and then his family migrated born in Kentucky, and they migrated on to Indiana and Illinois, and that seed went with them. In Appalachia, seeds tell stories, and they keep us rooted in where we come from, and they keep us bound to the land. The cooking process is the same. Mark Sohn was not a native of Appalachia, but he was an enthusiast of Appalachian foodways. And he wrote a book that included what you could do with the Cushaw. And there must have been 100 things he did. He talked about you could just roast it like you do a regular winter squash. You can make it into a creme brulee. You can use it for cakes and pies and muffins. You could use it in ice cream. You could use it in soups. And the list goes on and on and on of what you could do with this Cushaw. And people say, well, Cushaw, it's a winter squash, so yeah, it's a long time to grow. but it also is a long keeper. You know, that was one of probably one of the most important crops here when people were first establishing this region, because here we are, it is Easter weekend, and we still have cushaws that have been saved in a cool spot. They last forever.
You know, you keep a cushaw, any of the heavy winter squashes can keep for a year, sometimes longer. You know, if you keep them in the right spot. Back I grew up, we had a stone can house.
Kind of like a root cellar.
And we stored a lot of ours in the root cellars and the can houses, and those, you know, in the wintertime, you know, you don't have fresh foods, but you're still technically you're getting a fresh product when you get a winter squash or something like that. Only thing you gotta do is keep it dry.
For people that enjoy preserving food, canners, preppers, y'all, sometimes your garden comes in all at once and it gets really overwhelming. And so if you scatter your garden out, like with these cushaws, you know, I won't start drying. I've got cushaws and butternuts. I'm just now, from last season, now as things have kind of slowed down and I've worked through what I've worked through just for normal eating, what we've got left, I will go on and start dehydrating now. And if you plan your garden so that things don't all come in at once and just kill you when you're trying to can or dehydrate or preserve and put up for the next year, it makes a difference in your workflow, and it makes a difference in how you eat too.
You know, with saving the heirloom seeds, you're getting a taste of the past. I mean, we still cook beans the same way that my great-great-grandmother cooked them. You put them in a pot with water, a piece of pork and salt, and you cook them hours.
Bill Best tells the story about heirloom beans. He was one of the founders of the Lexington Farmers Market, which is a very large market for Kentucky. He tells the story, you know, he's always had the heirloom beans, and some of the other vendors would undercut his prices, but they were selling, you know, more modern beans. They weren't not open pollinated, but they were modern beans that were designed more for mechanical harvest and the taste had been bred out of them. It was just for bulk. You know, basically you were eating the hull. You weren't getting any green bean goodness, you know, the beanie goodness. And clients at the farmer's market would buy some of the beans from the other people, but they would come to Bill and they would buy more beans. And he'd say, well, why didn't you buy them all from me? And he said, well, Bill, you know, your prices are a little bit higher, but we can take your beans and mix them up with the beans that we bought that were cheaper, and we get some flavor. And that's the whole thing with heirloom beans, other than the history, which is what I really get about, you know, I get excited about, but the taste. And we should talk about Slow Food Arc of Taste. If you have never checked out the website for Slow Food Arc of Taste USA, they have a great list of all kinds of varieties of beans and pumpkins and just anything you can imagine, any kind of fruit or vegetable, and they tell you where it came from and why that it's in danger and why that they put it on the Slow Food Arc of Taste. It has to taste good to be the heirloom that they will put forth.
And the thing that you'll have to realize, even if you're not into this, you got to understand that originally food was grown for taste because it was used on the farm locally. They didn't care if you could put it in a box and ship it halfway across the country. They didn't care if it would lay in the store for 2 or 3 weeks, because they would pick it. They would either take it in and can it, dry it, or eat it. You know, and that's why you get the better taste out of the heirloom foods. So always remember, what you're buying out of the store was made for shipping and storage, not for taste.
So as we wrap up,
We're passionate. So.
We really are passionate about this, and we may have rambled a little bit more than we should have, but we hope that we've dropped some information that will help you consider growing heirloom seeds. With the climate the way it is, the situation, having seeds that you can save yourself and not depend on some company to be providing them for you just seems pretty smart and prudent in my book. And besides that, you'll be eating good. Check out our website, friendsdriftin.com. That's INN.com. And don't forget that we make gourmet jams and jellies.
We do gift boxes.
It's coming up on
Mother's Day.
Mother's Day. We got, peach habanero, which is a hot, spicy, really good on cream cheese. I've got a strawberry moonshine. We really do use legal moonshine.
Made right here in Pike County.
Made in Pike County to do that. We've got, put in here, we got a blueberry cardamom. You know, all blueberry cardamom tastes like spring. They say that cardamom is a warming spice, but to me it just gives that little bit of airiness, and when we cook that, it smells so good. We have a chocolate cherry. Y'all, this chocolate cherry, tell them what you like to do with the chocolate cherry
Chocolate
jam,
cherry,
Charlie.
it's got a tart pie cherry in it and some milk, and like not a milk chocolate, but a
real light
light chocolate. You stir that into a cup of coffee. You can make your own latte, and it takes the bitterness
Well,
away from the
it
coffee.
rounds out that bitter flavor so much. So we do ship these throughout the U.S. We have 4-packs and 6-packs. Visit us on friendsdriftin.com. Remember to like us down below. We get to 2,500 folks. We're going to start doing live chats so that we can interact more with you, but so we don't ramble so much.
Push that subscribe button, because that's how we get to those numbers.
For all of our folks that are seed savers out there, know we are really missing you this weekend, and we sure hope to resume next year. I'm Joyce.
I'm Charlie.
We're Friends Drift In. Have a blessed day.